Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to share with you 7 key moments where I knew France was my new home. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you are new here, welcome. I'm Patricia Brooks, an American living in the south of France since 2018. And I help people who are ready to start the next chapters of their lives, living and thriving in a foreign country, but who might need support in finding that confidence and courage to actually take the leap. And on this channel, I talk about my life in France, about moving abroad, and how to dig down deep and find that grit and determination to do what matters most to you in life. And today I'm going to be talking about 7 key moments where I knew France was home. Now, I got this idea for this video from a member of the Carefree Expat Incubator Program, a program I help single women who are ready to move through their blocks so they can live abroad. And she shared a story with me on a recent call that made me think about what the key moments were for me that made my living in France feel like I was actually living here, that France was my home. And so I'm going to share 7 of those with you. Now, the first one has to do with the pull that the United States had over me. In 2019, I returned to the United States for the first time after living in France for a year. And I still wanted to go back. I needed to go back because I had to renew my visa there. But I also was looking forward to going back. Well, 2020 was a different story. I needed to go back because I needed to close out my storage shed and ship some things so I could stop throwing money away on storage. And I was kind of torn because I really wasn't necessarily looking that forward to being back in the United States. Certainly to see some friends that I hadn't seen over the course of the last year. But beyond that, I was good. I did not feel like, I was missing things in the United States. So when the US started having less of a pull over me, when I started really not necessarily wanting to go back or craving the things that I could only get in the United States or stocking up on those things, like different size Ziploc bags. That was one thing I would, tuck away in my suitcase when I would return. Cans of black beans, hot sauce, things of that nature, teas that I can only get in the United States. I stopped craving those things as well. As a matter of fact, a couple years ago, somebody was coming to visit from the United States, and she asked, is there anything you want me to bring you? And I really couldn't think of anything because I had started to make substitutes, or those things that I was so used to before started to fade. So that was a key moment. And I'd say that started in 2020, that trip back. And that trip back was a long trip for me. It was supposed to be 3 weeks. It turned out to be 3 months. And because I got stuck because of COVID. And so that also underscored my feeling of, I really wish I was back in France, because France feels more like home than the United States. So the second thing that made me feel like France was my home was when I bought my car at the end of 2019. I wasn't sure if it was possible for me, and I've done a couple of videos about that, and I will share them in the description so you can check that out if you're interested. But it was definitely a feat that I had accomplished, but it also showed me that I was serious about making my life here in France stick. If I had not been serious, I would not have purchased a car. So that was, to me, is like, yes, Patricia, you're doing the things that you would do if France was your home. And so that felt like a big turning point for me as well. Around that time, maybe a month or 2 later, I had a couple of experiences in stores with the language and my language proficiency. Now, at that point, I was more comfortable with the language. I definitely am much, much more comfortable now. But I got to a point where I was confident enough to ask for what I needed. I was in a hardware store one time, and I needed a pot that had holes at the bottom of it, holes that would let the water drain out the bottom. And none of the pots in this hardware store had them. And it was frustrating to me because plants need those aeration holes. So there was somebody who was working there, and I asked him, a young man, and he's like, yeah, no, we don't have pots with holes in them. And that was all he said. He wasn't forthcoming with any other information. And I really didn't feel like driving around from one store to the next to find pots that were suitable for me. So in French, I asked him, well, what do people here in France do when they need flower pots that have holes in the bottom of them? And he said, oh, well, we have a little workshop in the corner of the store. You get the pots that you want, you take it over there, and we can drill holes in the bottom of your pots if you'd like. That felt so good to be able to be confident enough to ask for what I wanted. There's another situation about padded envelopes at an office supply store. There was a package of 10. I only needed 1 or 2. And so I went up to the cashier as I was checking out with some other things, and I asked, don't you sell these envelopes individually? And she reached underneath the counter and she pulled out 2 different sizes and asked me which size I wanted. Right? It was like, oh my gosh, I am doing this thing. So that affirmed me as well. That was really a feeling like, oh yes, I'm going to be able to make this life work out here. Now, number 4, this is a huge one. Before I knew that I was eligible for the carte vitale, the health insurance card, I just went to the doctor and I paid out of pocket. I just went to the pharmacy and I paid out of pocket. But each time I went to the pharmacy, I felt other, right? I felt like an outsider because I would present my prescription and they would ask me for my carte vitale, which I did not have because I had not applied for one because I, as an American, didn't think that healthcare was a human right. So they would ask for my carte vitale, and I started to feel a little defensive because I didn't have one. So each time I would go into the pharmacy for a prescription, I'd have to say, no, I don't have one. And they would look at me like I had 2 heads, and it was not a comfortable feeling. But after my ex-boyfriend told me, my boyfriend at the time told me that I was absolutely eligible, and I applied and got it, and I started going into the pharmacy and getting my prescriptions and being able to whip out my carte vitale, I felt like, oh yeah, I belong. France is home. I am a part of this society. So that was a huge turning point for me in feeling like France was my home. Now, number 5 has to do with my business. When I got here in 2018, a couple of months after I got here, I opened a bank account. And that bank account, I didn't typically use a whole lot. I transferred money in to that account, but I didn't have any money flowing in automatically. And so the bank account wasn't really being used in the normal way that bank accounts here are. And so I think one day I asked for something or needed something, and the banker said to me, oh, well, this isn't a real bank account, or something to that effect, which did not make me feel like I belonged here. I felt other. But once I started a business here, I needed a business bank account. And so I went into my banker, scheduled an appointment with my banker, and got that set up. And it was then that I started to feel respected by the bank. That I was not just some foreigner with a bank account, but that I was somebody who was a part of French society. That I was a part of France. As a matter of fact, I got that bank account. I felt seen. But not only that, as a part of an offering that the bank had, I got a cell phone plan. Now, up until that point, and this is 3 years in, I I did not have a cell phone plan here in France. I had a SIM card, and each month I would go and I would buy a plan for 30 days. And each 30 days I'd have to go in and get another one and get another one and put a code in and all of that. And that didn't feel like I was really rooted here. But when I opened that bank account, that was an offering that was provided to me. And I could feel my shoulders going back in that appointment, which really made me feel like a part of France. That, along with starting the business, but I think truly it was that interaction at that bank of feeling seen, of feeling like I belonged, that France was truly my home, that I was putting down roots here. After I got my Profession Libérale visa, I had to go to a series of French civics classes. This was another moment that I started to feel rooted here, that I felt like I was being accepted here. Not because the people who are citizens here, who have been born here and are citizens here, ever have to go through the civics classes that immigrants have to go through, or some immigrants have to go through. But because France was seeing me as somebody who might stay here long term and would need to know what the rules are here, would need to know a little bit about French history. And so that felt very satisfying. That felt like I belonged. And finally, and I think this is probably the biggest one, and this is one that I experience regularly now, and that is being recognized and being seen as part of the community here. Now, when I first moved to France, one of the things I liked about it was that nobody knew me here, that I had this freedom to just kind of be and not have to worry that I was going to bump into somebody who was looking at me stare at a plant that was unusual to me, right? And think, oh, she's weird, right? I had that freedom. But a little over a year and a half in, I was spotted on the street and people would call my name with a French accent. And I initially didn't think they would be calling me because I didn't think anybody knew me here. So that was a turning point, being recognized on the street, but then even more being seen as somebody who belongs here, being offered tomatoes or apricots from local farmers by, walking through town and running into 2 or 3 people and chatting and having, 10 or 15 or 20-minute conversations and just feeling like I am a part of this beautiful community. So I think that is the one that makes me feel like I most belong here, that France is most like home. Those other ones, those other milestones or turning points definitely have helped me feel more rooted, but the one that is the most affirming is that connection with my community. And it feels so good. There's nothing like it. Have you ever moved to a different place and felt like an outsider? What were those pivotal moments that you had that started to make you feel like you were making inroads, that new place was starting to feel more and more like home? Let me know in the comments. I want to thank you so much for watching to the end. If you are watching this, you might be considering making a move abroad. And if that's the case, you might feel a little bit overwhelmed or unsure about what steps to take and when. If that is the case, I have a Pathfinder Oracle resource that will help you to identify where you are in the move abroad process, and based on that, what step you should take next. So I will put a link to that in the description so that you can download that absolutely free. So if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, share it with friends, subscribe to my channel if you have not already, and I will see you again next time. Bye for now.